Punishing Gray Raven is known for being one of the most free-to-play friendly games in the gacha space, and that title is rightfully deserved. Whether it be the gacha system itself and its generous pity with guarantees, or the rate at which currency comes in guaranteeing you at least every new character of a single copy every time they come around, it's something that I think other gacha games should definitely keep track of, as it's something that players absolutely love about the game. There's one other element too that is also very free to play friendly, but actually I think might be working against it. And what that thing is this game's artifact system, also called memories. Now that I've progressed as far into the game as I have, I think this is something that has actually ended up working against the game as a whole and not exactly helping it. As we jump into this now as well, thank you guys so much for all the lovely comments you've been leaving on the videos recently. I get so many comments on my hair. It's just absolutely hilarious. People just saying, look, his hair's looking so good today. I see those. Thank you. I appreciate it. I feel like I had a bit of a chick moment. I cut off like 5 to 6 inches of my hair and no one even noticed. Only hurt a little bit. One final thing before we look at the memory system, make sure to drop a like and subscribe on the channel, guys. Let's go in and take a look. So as I've already addressed in this video, Punishing Gray Raven has a reputation for being a free-to-play friendly game. That is largely off the back of its R&D system, where every time a new character debuts, they come on a 100% rate up on a 60 pity, and you can, on a free-to-play account, go through and save from events and weekly currency amounts that you can get from completing missions. You can get at least a single copy of each new S-rank character as they debut, which is fantastic. No complaints there. This aspect also comes into effect when taking into consideration a character's signature weapon and a pet. Now you have to be a little more frugal and careful with your black cards to guarantee each of those, but with a little bit of luck, you can basically guarantee a weapon and a pet as well, which is very helpful when it comes to building a character. But the final piece that goes into building a character that has some degree of an RNG component is the memory system. As I said before, memories are this game's artifact system. They're called artifacts in Genshin Impact, for example. They're called stigmata in Honkai Impact 3rd. They've all got their own names that fit their in-universe reason as to why they're called that, but we all understand the same, that this is the gear or equipment that you're going to be putting on your character that's going to give them their increased stats and damage. Now, getting these memories is actually quite simple, with each new patch bringing in an event farming stage where you can literally come in and purchase the memories that you need. It saves so much time, especially when you factor in that memories themselves don't have any RNG baked into the system. By that I mean on the base memories themselves. Every Charlotte that's going to be in a slot 1 is all going to have the same HP and crit value when it has been raised. There's no RNG on that factor of it or of any part of the bonuses that come along with it. Where the RNG does come into play on the memories is in the game's resonance system, which is where you can lock a memory to a specific character, but give them increased buffs when doing so. You can do this by selecting a duplicate memory and then resonating it on the character. When you do it through this way, there is a random bonus that will be added to the slot, but you can look at swapping the resonance out and re-rolling it again and again. So if you do happen to miss the resonance that you want, you can still continue to try and do so. Also, the resonance that are there, it comes from a fairly limited roster, so just trying to do it off of that system of doing the random generated perk that you can get is actually a pretty viable option. However, this game also then introduced a beautiful tool called the Memory Resonance Material Picker. And if you choose to use this item instead of it being random, you just get to pick which perk you actually want on it. So getting the ideal memory sets on the character that you need resonated with the perks that you want is so accessible in this game. It is probably the most accessible I've ever seen in a gacha game for getting the optimal pieces on a character. Anybody can build a character in a game like Genshin or Honkai Star Rail when you can get copium artifact pieces and make do with what you have. But Punishing Gray Raven actually makes it accessible to get optimal memory sets, and really it's kind of needed and strongly encouraged to do so. So all of these factors are very positive when it comes to free-to-play friendliness with building a character in the game. Easily accessible characters, weapons, pets, and memory sets. However, That is a bit of a double-edged sword, and let's talk about why. Now, unlike games like Honkai Star Rail or Wuthering Waves for that matter, the resonance effect that comes on the memories in Punishing Gray Raven are pretty much specific to the characters. Whereas on some of the earlier sets like Patton here, for example, that we've been looking at, it's got some general perks. On 2-piece, you get an increased crit rate and physical damage increased by 5%. And then on the 4-piece, you also get some additional physical damage as well as some crit hit and crit rate. So that's something that can be applied and effective for any physical-based characters in Punishing Gray Raven, assuming, of course, they're an attacker, specifically in the case of Patton. But this crosses into a lot of other support-based sets, like for example with Da Vinci having the ability when a QTE is triggered that it's going to automatically trigger the QTE of the other character in the party, allowing you to use QTE bots way more effectively and as a result greatly increasing your damage. Definitely some value in those memory sets. However, starting around the time of Rosetta Rigger coming into the game, which was about 10 or 11 patches after the game launched, based on the cycle of characters that have been released, they started building memory sets a little bit differently. Memory sets started being more tuned specifically to the character. Using Rosetta as our example here, the 2-piece bonus from Luuk is an attack increase of 3% and physical damage increase of 7%. Fairly general and not an issue, something that it can apply to any physical-based unit. However, on the 4-piece, it increases the effect of Lance of Perception by 20%. Well, what does that mean? What the heck is Lance of Perception? Lance of Perception is a special effect that's triggered on Rosetta Rigger's blue orb that reduces the target's physical defense by 20% for 8 seconds. Lee Wenhook then increases the effect of Lance of Perception by 20% more and deals 5% more damage against the target under the effect of Lance of Perception. So this is something that can only ever be triggered and is only ever applicable to Rosetta Rigger. And this is the kind of memory sets that have been released basically since Rosetta has been added into the game. Every time an S-rank character has been added, there's been a new memory set released along with them that has had a character-specific benefit on the 4-piece set. Now, of course, with that only being on the 4-piece set, there is still going to be a 2-piece bonus that is applicable, and so there is still going to be some customization there. However, generally the 4-piece bonuses that came along with those new memory sets made them basically mandatory to be placed on those characters when they did release. I think this has had both a positive and a negative effect, and I know that's going to bother some people because some people really like the way that the memory system in Punishing Gray Raven works. Broadly speaking, I do too, but I think this has reduced something that is present in other gacha games, and that's theory crafting. A lot of other games, usually there's going to be some conversation around what artifact sets you're going to place on a character. Certain bonuses are different than others, and depending on other characters that are part of the team is going to determine what artifacts that you want to use. And there's a lot of exploration and theory that can be explored on the different artifact sets to find out what's actually the best one for that character. A lot of people love exploring and chasing that meta. But when you have memory sets that are basically the same as a signature weapon, which is also basically mandatory for characters in many cases, there's not really going to be that same degree of theory crafting. The deeper I've gotten into this game, I think I've started to realize that, and a lot of people have raised complaints that, there's not a lot of content creators that cover PGR. One of the big factors of any kind of gacha games community and content creation scene is exploring the kits of characters and doing theory crafting about what set is going to be the best. And don't get me wrong, there's still some great content around how to play the characters and their skills and their rotations and what characters should go into the teams, and so that's definitely part of the conversation, but it's not as broad as general theory crafting on the memory sets themselves. Why are we even going to have a conversation about what memory set is best for Lucia Crimson Weave when we know she's going to get a 50% increase on the base damage of her core passive, and she's going to get an 80% damage increase on her signature strike? Like, there's just, generally speaking, not really a conversation to be had there. The closest I've seen to that degree of theory crafting comes into play on, again, these 2 pieces on whether a character is at an S rank, double S, or SS3, or up to a triple S or triple S plus. Sometimes these 2-piece sets can come into question about which one might actually be better for the character, but that generally is not a huge part of the conversation. Now, to be clear, I still acknowledge that there are some cases where you are going to use different memory sets. Again, going back to Rosetta as our example here, there are some cases like in Punishing Pain Cage, instead of maybe having her on Lee Wen Hook, you might actually have her on a Da Vinci instead for proccing the additional QTE like we've already talked about. But at that point, you're just kind of going between, is it a QTE bot or is it a character I'm actually going to use on field for the rotation? There's still not a ton of theory crafting there. There's still not a lot of debate between players about which memory sets are actually the best for those characters. You can pretty much just go to grayravens.com and they're going to have what memory sets you're likely going to be using there and what resonance you're even going to want there as well. Now, I don't want this to sound like I'm just complaining about the game. I do still think there's a lot of benefit to the system in that, again, it makes it very free to play friendly. This is still by far one of the most accessible artifact systems I have ever seen in a gacha game. Leave me in the comments down below if there's one better than this. I honestly don't think there is one, but I do still think as a consequence of having this very accessible system, it has basically removed a whole line of content of theory crafting and debate about what sets are actually the best, which I think contributes to a game not having as much discussion online or as much exposure. This whole thing started because I saw a content creator I know, Ioku. He's been arguing with people online about Acheron and about if she's actually good for new accounts and for free-to-play players or if she's not. There's been this whole conversation around the theory crafting of a character and what's actually the optimal builds and the teams and the characters you have on your account. And I just feel like that conversation isn't as much a thing in PGR because a lot of the times it's a little more cut and dry just based on the nature of the game, which again, I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing. I just think it's the consequence of having a very accessible system. But what do you guys think? Do you guys disagree with me? Do you think that's not a cause of that? Do you think, no, there is way more debate and I'm just ignorant to some of it and maybe there's more going on? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. But I do still think that is the case. But I'd love to be corrected on it or love to hear your perspective on it. I always think it's really interesting to hear from the community what some of those thoughts are. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. Again, make sure to drop a like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate that. Shout out to all the patrons who support this channel. If you want to support me, you can find a link for the Patreon in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.